All right, Martha MacCallum is live with us in Normandy, France, and she joins us now. Martha, what is the atmosphere there like today? It must be an incredible thing to see firsthand.
Yeah, good morning, Carly. Good morning, Todd. It is just an absolutely stellar, beautiful blue morning here at the American Cemetery in Normandy, France. There's a lot of veterans here, a lot of World War II veterans that we've been talking to over the course of the last few days. I think the mood here is upbeat in general. Everybody's looking forward to the speeches from President Macron of France, and that will be followed by President Trump shortly after that. But there's also, of course, a solemn mood as you walk through these crosses and you think about the 9,388 who are buried in the cemetery behind me. They gave everything. Their sacrifice was complete. So many of the veterans that I speak to refer to that. They say the reason that I come back is because I have to pay homage to the people that fought on either side of me, who never got the chance to go home, to have a family, to get married, to have children, to watch them grow up. All of those experiences that these men who rest here in this cemetery never got to have. And I think that's the overwhelming feeling of so many people who come back here to visit. We saw Secretary Kerry out here this morning, Speaker Pelosi. It is a gathering of leaders from all over the world where people recognize, as your prior guest was saying, a generation that was selfless, that saw something that was more important than their own lives that they had to fight for. And I think that is what characterizes what's known as the greatest generation. And it's an important message, I think, for all of us to sort of pause and think about what they did for all of us on June 6, 1944, when it began right here.
As we await the president leaving Air Force One for Marine One, Martha MacCallum joining us live. Martha, I'm going to go on a limb and say you had the best assignment of all the Normandy assignments, speaking to so many members of that greatest generation. Is there one story that you can tell us that really just resonated with you?
Well, you heard the prior guest talking a little bit about Tom Rice, and I think he really nailed it. I mean, Tom Rice is 97 years old. He doesn't complain about anything. He wants to jump out of the airplane so that everybody remembers his buddies that he fought with here. He was in the 101st Airborne, known as the Screaming Eagles. They practiced for 2 years, the jumps in Georgia, in Fort Benning, Georgia. Then they got here. It was pitch black night. The planes that they were on, many of them were hit. Some of the pilots were killed. Some of those planes went down when the paratroopers jumped out of them. The stories of heroics are just, I think, beyond most of our comprehension to understand how much danger they were in and how threatening all of that was to them. And yet the perseverance of someone like Tom Rice, who comes back here and continues to jump all these years later and enjoys being with all of the people who have common experience with him, but also being a message to all of us about what it means to be tough, to be strong, to be resilient, and, you know, not to worry so much about yourself, but to think about other people. So Jack Gutman's another person who comes to mind. He's also in his 90s. He made his first trip back. He was a medic. He was 18 years old, and he tended to those who were dying on the beach when he was just 18 years old. He tried to save their lives. And yesterday he came back here for the very first time to pay tribute to many of those who were lost on the beaches. And he's just a remarkable man. It was so moving to meet and talk with him. But the humility of these veterans is the thing that really sticks with you. They're kind, they're generous, and they don't want to be looked at as heroes. They say, you know, the people who didn't get to come home, those are the real heroes.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Tom Rice's story is so incredible, Martha. You're absolutely right. We actually have a little bit of sound from him. Let's take a listen, and then we'll get your reaction on the back end.
Okay.
This is one of the closures for that jump. I represent the United States coming here, and this might be the conclusion for me, or a closure of all the fame, shame, and blame that we all gather together, you know. I really appreciate all their love and their kindness and their heartfelt emotions.
He's 97 years old. He looks about 20 years younger. God bless him. It must have been such an honor to be able to talk to him.
It really is. You know, I mean, we should all be so lucky to be as sharp and with it and athletic as Tom Rice is at 97 years old. He says he's going to keep doing these jumps. And, you know, I think when he talks about closure for himself personally, but also just to recognize, you know, World War II, it could have ended very differently. You know, we could have ended with German occupation not being rolled back in all of these countries. You think about the Jews of Europe.
Martha, interrupting you for a second.
The incredible toll that they paid.
President Trump
yeah,
and
go ahead.
Melania.
Oh, here's the president coming out of Air Force One. Yep.
Making their way down the steps right now. Please continue, Martha. We'd always like to interrupt to get to the walking shop, but we don't want to miss your thoughts here.
Obviously something that we've all been waiting for. This has been an incredible trip for the past few days. The president has taken the same journey, really, that the Allies took over the course of the last 72 hours. He was in Portsmouth in the United Kingdom, where the troops rallied and where they, convened before they began that journey. And now President Trump here in France, where he will be greeted by President Macron and many dignitaries who are here today. This is an incredible assembly of world leaders that are here today to commemorate this event. I mean, when you think about the president and the things that he has spoken about, NATO, a lot of people say that he wants to destroy NATO, but the action that he's actually taken has been to encourage the nations that are involved in it to increase the defense capabilities by paying more into the system of NATO. So, these are the big issues that I think he'll talk about with Emmanuel Macron when they sit down later. I think the speech you would look for, an inspirational, uplifting speech. President Reagan gave an amazing speech here on the 40th anniversary at Pointe-à-Hoc. So these are the things that, as historians, you look back at later that mark the moment. And the president has an opportunity to do something very special today, and we'll all be watching.
As the president and first lady make their way to Marine One, you mentioned history just seconds ago. On your show, on our show, we often mention in today's day and age, colleges, high schools, a whitewashing of history. How important is a day like today to see what really happened, the sacrifices, the horror, and the world that resulted from that? How important is that?
Well, I think it's extremely important. And, that's one of the reasons that we've spent the last couple of months featuring World War II veterans every week on our show. And unfortunately, there's not a mandatory World War II class in high school. I mean, there's a very broad scope of history that's being taught. And I think it's extremely important that the next generation understand this sacrifice, because freedom is not free, as we know. And the people who are buried here at the Normandy American Cemetery gave their lives for the freedom that we enjoy today. And it is an extraordinary lesson that I think is so important for children to understand.
Just to bounce off that, when you hear stories about World War II, you always hear about the thousands of young men who lined up to enlist because they felt like it was an honor to serve and it was their duty to serve, and they couldn't think about doing anything else in such a grave time. It's not like that anymore. Was there a greater sense of American pride back then?
I think that the need for victory in that moment was so clear-cut, Carly, that it was, when you watch bombing going on in London and you see Hitler's troops marching through the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, there is a very clear, immediate danger that was about to, the next step would have been to come across the ocean and to do a similar sort of conquering in the United States, which of course was unthinkable. So there was no choice but to fight and no choice but to rally at that point. It was very, very clear cut. But also there was just a tremendous sense of duty. You think about the fact that people who were 16 and 17 years old, some of them changed the dates on their baptismal certificates or their birth certificates so that they could be sent over. They wanted to be part of that mission. It was almost, I think, embarrassing for young men who were home at that point, because people wanted to understand, why are you here when everybody else is over there? And not to forget the home front effort that was underway and the sacrifices that everybody made and things they did without in order to support the war effort. So it was 100% across the board.
And some of those individuals as young as 15. And when you think about that, I put myself in a 15-year-old's shoes, can barely tie my shoes, much less decide that I want to go off to a foreign land and fight and potentially die for my country. You're looking live there as Marine One gets ready to leave for Normandy. Before it takes off, I want to get your sense of this quickly, Martha. In your interview with Tom Rice, he said young people, young generations need to seek out veterans to ask about their experiences. We started the top of the show explaining, look, this is it. This is the 75th anniversary. At the 100-year anniversary, these individuals are not going to be around. How important is it for the younger generations to talk to their grandparents, their great-grandparents, and get a sense of this time in history?
The thing that really strikes me is that a lot of these individuals in their 90s who we're talking to now say that up until recently, they really didn't share their stories. It was too painful for them to do so. But now they are opening up and they are talking about it. And I think it's really important for people to listen to that. And also to keep in mind that these opportunities are going to be gone, as you say. At the 40th anniversary, there were 11 million World War II veterans in the country. Today, there are 500,000, and most of them are in their 90s. So if you think about that, these opportunities to meet these men are going away. And so it's very important to get their stories down and to share them with younger generations, because it really is what we're all about as American citizens.
That's right.
And it's something that we need to
completely
have
woven,
close to our hearts.
absolutely woven into the fabric of our country. It's amazing that there are even 500,000 alive. The power of modern medicine there. You just saw Marine One about to take off with the president and the First Lady inside as they head to Normandy. Martha, thank you so much for the fantastic analysis and color.
Thank you, guys.